This is a story of a kid who once found a light blue floppy disk in a dusty drawer in his old house. Because there weren't that many video game discs just laying around, and especially no internet connection where he was from in the countryside in the early 90s, he often hoped that one day one of the boring old MS-DOS software disks from his dad's office would magically turn into an incredible game that he hadn't played before. This light blue floppy he found looked like one of those old software disks, except that its label was ripped off, and the front was partially broken. The metal part of the disk would easily rip off, but it would still work. The moment he turned on his 486, inserted the floppy into the A drive, heard the satisfying loading sound, and saw the screen turn black, he knew that he was going to start a journey into the unknown, an adventure that would change his life forever in ways that he would not be able to predict. The thing that struck him initially was being blinded by those powerful cyan and magenta colors in front of his face. Not much of what he saw made sense. Not a lot of shapes, sounds, or images worked at all. And as a matter of fact, he was actually pretty convinced that the game itself was probably broken. Perhaps it was pirated in a way that the VGA, EGA color palettes were removed to make the whole game folder fit into a 720 kilobyte floppy drive. The game looked a lot like wide shots from a movie, but he could move the main character through beautiful atmospheric landscapes or terrifying dungeons and buildings from the distant future. He was immediately immersed. He played for hours non-stop. His parents weren't home that day. Therefore, his 1 hour limit per day rule would not apply. So he kept going. So many emotions, so much depth, so much variety of action made him feel like this wasn't just an ordinary action game. It was a dynamic story. A personal experience told through the eyes of someone who went through many life journeys. An experience that was able to connect on a human level more than any other media he's ever seen before. One day he stopped playing. He turned off his PC and removed the floppy from the drive. There was only one problem. The metal piece of the floppy remained stuck inside the computer, in a way that when he would turn on the computer again, it would display the message, "Boot failed, could not read the boot disk." He was mortified, terrified. He could not tell his parents because he felt so bad about breaking something he cared so much about, so he didn't. As a result, his dad sent the computer to get fixed. The metal piece was gone and all he had left was a broken, unusable floppy. Eventually that floppy got thrown out, so he never got to play that game again. Such an easy thing to fix, but he was too young at the time to know what to do. He kept thinking about it ever since.
What's up, gang, and welcome back aboard the Paper Starship. This is your pilot ReDuX, back in the saddle and ready to take us on another strange Mediaverse odyssey. Now, when the word remake comes up for games, it would be assumed that some sort of improvement or upgrade takes place, adding the je ne sais quoi missing from the original work. And our subject today, the 2019 video game The Eternal Castle, claims to be one such bolstered work, stating it's a remaster of the 1987 game which has essentially been lost to time. But why do I say this is just a claim? Well, because there was no Eternal Castle video game in 1987. I think. I'm like 98% sure on that.
The last 2% is hardest to get. That's why they leave it in the milk.
What?
But that doesn't mean that this 2019 aesthetic effort isn't a remake. It's just not in the traditional sense. Then again, very few things about the Eternal Castle I would classify as traditional. Here on the Paper Starship, it's about connecting the Mediaverse from the past to the present, and the mainstream to the obscure. And I think you can see why I would be intrigued by a modern, obscure indie game with bizarre phantom origins and vibes tied to 1987. Under the radar may be an understatement for the Eternal Castle, as during this project, it would seem myself and our crew engineer Max were basically the only two people on the planet playing this game. Despite being on the PlayStation Store for roughly 3 months, it's only been purchased 66 times, with the vast majority of its trophies being completed only by myself and one other person. Now, does that mean that the Eternal Castle is a soul-crushingly difficult game that only I stand atop the mountain of? No. In fact, I still haven't even earned the platinum for this title. But it does show that there's a lot more to the Eternal Castle than most are willing to dig further to find. It doesn't happen often, but this game became a red pill moment that made me want to go down the rabbit hole and decipher what I could about this strange enigma of gaming that just kind of took hold and mesmerized me in a way few games have. It's one of those hard to describe in a nutshell things, and why I decided to make this document of, in order to hopefully bring to light what makes the Eternal Castle so special, by exploring its innovative concepts and gorgeous aesthetics, while discussing its in-depth gameplay and pop cultural shades resonating throughout. Forget Whim of a Madman insights, this whole project and the game itself are the whims of madmen.
Did you know I'm utterly insane?
I like that.
Buckle up, gang, and prepare for a turbulent journey through a mayhem-filled hellscape of hammers, machine guns, swords, and, meditation? Yeah, like I said, this game is something else. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Eternal Castle. Past projects have shown the best way to gain insight to the thoughts and concepts implemented into a piece of media is to try and understand the person who made it. And with the Eternal Castle, I turned a lens onto its creator, Leonard Menchiari, in order to figure out his creative style and process. He's done a few short films, with his two biggest highlights being 2011's Half-Life Singularity Collapse and the intricately produced interactive short movie Neo Dusk in 2018. Both films are well executed, but I'd like to focus on the latter, which offered a strange choose-your-own-adventure style narrative akin to what Netflix attempted with Bandersnatch. And though Menchiari didn't have Black Mirror money and the short film was released on YouTube, it was more engaging and effective than Netflix's effort. It's a really fun and interesting piece of film with a total of 12 different endings, and it's worth it to go through them all. I've gone ahead and linked both short films in the description, and seriously, give these films a shot, you won't regret it. Now, I've listed Menchiari's film work, but Eternal Castle isn't his first effort in the world of gaming. That would be the 2017 real-time strategy game Riot Civil Unrest. And there's not a single article or review about this game that doesn't include the word unique, as the core of the game was a pixel RTS taking place during recreations of recent real-life civil confrontations. The game allows the player to take control of the protesters or the police, and it rewards protesters for pacifist efforts rather than wreaking havoc. Now, I didn't get a chance to play Riot, but I felt I needed to mention it simply because it continues to show a pattern of what's important to Menchiari when creating concept and innovation. Thinking outside the box is the name of his game, and once I understood that pushing the boundaries would be part of the conditions of playing a Menchiari title, the Eternal Castle began to make a bit more sense. But before we dive headfirst into the core of the game's inner workings, let's stay on its concepts and aesthetics, because this wasn't a one-man effort. The game's looks have to be credited to concept artist Daniele Vicinanzo and developer Giulio Perrone, who translated the conceptual pieces to the gaudy yet gorgeous CGA style, reminiscent of 80s DOS-era games. The ultra-retro look pulled me in at first sight, and the coolness factor felt reminiscent of Far Cry Blood Dragon in terms of in-your-face 80s sci-fi cyberdoom vibes. Actually, this whole game is a vibe, and one I jived with so much it led me to buying the user guide for Eternal Castle. No, this is not at Barnes & Noble's or on Amazon. The user guide continues Eternal Castle's obscure ways and is only for sale on Lulu.com. No, not that Lulu. I don't think. Anyways, the user guide is absolutely worth it if you fall in love with the game like I did. Not only does it include concept art, but the way the guide is laid out is almost like a graphic novelization of the game. Eternal Castle's look is already unique enough for a game, and it's just as viscerally unique as a comic book. It's not just pretty to look at though, it is a practical guide as well that does provide insight and tips to reach certain items and areas. I've gone ahead and put the Lulu.com link in the description as well. But let's cap off the list of developmental aesthetics by looking at Eternal Castle's OST, which is complete with wailing guitar riffs, pulse-pounding drums, and kick-ass synthesizer beats that all come together in perfect harmony from the masterful hand of musical artist Kiro, who seamlessly creates one of the most head-bobbing gaming soundtracks I've listened to since Ruiner. Anytime I'm listening to a gaming OST away from playing it, that's a very good sign. If you go digging through old AMAs on Reddit for Eternal Castle, you can glean a bit more on the who, what, why, and when of things. There's still a considerable amount left up to reference as well though, but the how of things I actually found by sheer accident. I was sifting through the game maker websites used to create title lists and, lo and behold, I stumbled onto the Eternal Castle. So yeah, a very small team using Game Maker to create this mysterious gem is just such a 1980s in your garage tech startup feel, and it's just really cool. But like this game's nebulous origins, everything surrounding it's murky. Even my attribution of credits I can't say are 100%. With such a small group working on the project, it can be assumed people had multiple roles. Speaking of multiple roles, I spent a lot of time trying to write a cohesive and witty explanation / analysis of the Eternal Castle, and I just couldn't do it. Not because it's impossible, but mainly because so few people have played this game that would be like talking to the wall. So I knew that this video was going to require co-op. So in a departure from the traditional video style, I called upon our Paper Starship crew engineer Max, who happens to be the only other person on planet Earth playing this game besides myself, to try and make some coherent sense of what we both experienced over the course of a couple weeks in the Eternal Castle.
But Eternal Castle, dude. You want to start at the story, and we might as well get into it. Yeah, the premise, dude. What is this thing even like? Like, give me the byline on the Eternal Castle.
Here's the problem with Eternal Castle is that it opens up with this really illegible text that's almost impossible to read.
You couldn't read it on PS4 either. I figured that either it was a resolution thing or it was on purpose.
That's a totally on purpose thing, but it at least doesn't. It's not one of those ones where it just flashes up for 10 seconds and then it moves on. At least gives you the option to sit there for 5 fucking minutes to figure out what you're actually reading. But apparently, it's the year 20XX. Some of humanity has moved up to space. There's a extraterrestrial colony going on up there, where they send back these AIs to Earth to collect supplies. One of the AIs has gone to Earth, and it's been here for a long time, and it has lost communication with the satellite up top. So they send a lone soldier down to recover the AI, and you get your choice of either playing as Adam or Eve to start out the game. And you crash land on Earth, and as you crash land, your glider gets shot out of the sky, and 4 of the fragments are scattered across the land, which are the stages that you end up going through.
You can kind of correct me if I'm wrong here, but part of the, situation with that too is Adam and Eve aren't just like regular organic, meaty people like we understand they are today. They're so incorporated into this system that they're essentially a part of the AI. So it's a princess in a castle kind of narrative, very old school.
Very much so. I guess, should we even talk about it from a level-to-level standpoint?
What I think we can do is just talk about the map and the sequencing. Because the game is very straight up. There's more depth to the game. The game essentially is like a trap door that opens up, and you stand. Your first kind of experience with the game is standing on it, thinking like, ground feels a little weird here, but it really does open up, later on. But the essential, like, thing to understand is the game is made up of an introduction level, like a tutorial level, 3 other maps that, I'll let you kind of describe the detail of.
The Eternal Castle is broken up into 3 different stages: the Unholy Church, the Forgotten City, and the Ancient Ruins. Each area has its own unique vibe to it and a playstyle to complement it. Starting with the Unholy Church, this level gives off shades of old-school Italian Gothic horror flicks of the 70s and 80s, and its gameplay style puts an emphasis on stealth and evasion, culminating with the fight against a mutated scientist and his robotic wife who's been brought back to life using the glider fragments. Continuing forward, you'll traverse the Ancient Ruins, which has an Apocalypto meets Indiana Jones in hell kind of feel to it. I think this is the most in-your-face level, and it's all about survival against the terrain, traps, and of course, the Ancient Ruin tribes. Melee combat and platforming are the emphasis of this stage, which finds you facing off against a shaman who's taken the glider fragment and claimed himself a god. And last but not forgotten is the Forgotten City. This was probably my favorite level of them all, giving off some heavy Mad Max vibes. Okay, let's be real, every level has some degree of Mad Max dystopian vibes, but Forgotten City also reminded me of Cyberdoom efforts like Harlan Ellison's A Boy and His Dog and the 1986 anime Grey Digital Target. Gunplay is the name of the game in this level. I won't lie, bursting down a door wearing a cape and toting a machine gun to pump enemies full of lead may have been my favorite moment of this whole game. This level concludes with you chasing down a sniper who had stolen the glider fragment and was holed up awaiting a chance to sell it for big money.
Then once you've completed those 3 maps, you are able then to travel to the eponymous Eternal Castle and confront the AI. So it's a very short set of sequences in the grand scheme of, like, what people might expect from a much, much bigger game, or even, like, some other indies that are, like big games or big maps.
Even though it is only 3 stages, there's still an open world linear aspect to it all, because it gives you a choice of which stages you want, which order you want to tackle the stages. You don't have to do it in any particular order.
Yeah. The branching route structure creates a problem that's present in a lot of old games like this, which is the order in which you collect certain things will vastly change your experience with this game.
Bit of narrative logic that goes into every single aspect of this game, whether it's discovering the gameplay or actually figuring out the story itself.
This is something that I found very interesting about just my overall experience with this game, which is that if you are familiar at all with the kind of these early computer games that this game is based on, even like old console stuff like Atari had some crossover with some of these games, but like my first thing getting there was, oh, this is Pitfall, where you basically it is like an Indiana Jones treasure hunting thing, and you gotta hop over crocodiles and swing on shit, and there's trapdoors and quicksand, and it's one of those PC adventure games, and like each one of these levels really does sort of have a thread that is tied to a game from the era that this one claims to be from in the first place, specifically in and around 1987. And it's like, if that's something that you have any awareness of, your first playthrough will be running into this shit nonstop.
The 2 games that keep on getting mentioned in forums that Eternal Castle is compared to are Another World and Prince of Persia. And you played Prince of Persia when you were younger. I didn't play that, but I recently played Another World. And when you mentioned Pitfall, clearly you were a Pitfall person. I didn't play Pitfall, but I played the old school Super Nintendo Indiana Jones game. So it's kind of interesting that we both have these 2 different versions of comparative forms, and they still fit together with everything that goes on.
This is definitely where we can get into some of the tricks that this game is pulling off. And this is part of the narrative. This is part of the, like, meta narrative of how the game it presents itself. But so much of that era, and like you're saying, like the Super Nintendo era was kind of where this started to end, but so much of the arcade era, the early PC era, the early console era was that games were a lot more book-like in the sense that you had to imagine a lot more off of what was being shown to you. You know, like one of the first kind of games that, you know, had a quest in mind is that game Adventure, where you literally play as like a red dot and you try to move from room to room and gather keys. I know it was on the Atari. I don't know if it was originally on PC, but like there was a time where, you know, the best graphics on the entire game was on the manual or the box. And even looking at the logo for the Eternal Castle, it's trying to kind of coax that out of you, where you're building a lot of the story and the mood and things out of very, very rough images, because it's all, you know, it's 3 colors. It's you know, 2 or 3 colors at most, and motion.
Very, very minimalist.
And there was a time where that was done because those were the obstructions, those were the constraints, and this is a choice. So, you know, all this has to be kind of, if you're really trying to play this game and think about what's going on with this game, you got to kind of keep that in mind. But then talking about, like, you know, you played the Indiana Jones game on Super Nintendo. I'm talking about Pitfall, going all the way back to Adventure. Like, there is a thread of consistent building upon you know, things that now people just expect. You expect puzzles to work a certain way in games. You expect sequences to play out a certain way in games. And this is literally possible to trace all the way back to the beginning because it's such a young medium. And, you know, once you get to the Super Nintendo and you have a little bit of graphical fidelity and you can actually go, hey, that does look like Indiana Jones. It's not just a bunch of pixels wiggling around, even though it is. You've got enough color and detail there where you're like, no, that's something that I don't have to do as much work to put a face and an image to. And this is like that, you know, that is the legacy, that is the lasting legacy of these cinematic action platformers, essentially, where, you know, late 80s and shit like Pitfall, you automatically can see where that gets to Uncharted from technological development, or it gets to Death Stranding from technological development. But the memory of how it happened is lost. You know, people that play games today just don't know this shit, and there's not fucking really anybody other than just people on the internet collectively doing this shit, recording this history and putting it in a context. So one of the most magic things about this game is that it kind of dares to not just be a remake of something that doesn't exist. It tries to remake the spirit of that entire era, both inside and outside the game. Which, you know, it's fucking bold. Like, people totally slept on this game, and it is very much just a passion project that will, like, kind of wither on the vine.
Oh.
I just want to hear what your process of discovery was. The way you can play this game. You know what I mean? You played on PS4, I played on PC, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, essentially, I brute forced my way through the trophies and through probably my first 2 runs, because there were trophies that you were asked, that I told you I got, that you were puzzled because I didn't know some of the mechanics. You're like, how the hell did you even do that? I'm like, I don't know. I just kept hitting the buttons. Finished my first game, and afterward, it gives you the option to start what would be a second playthrough, and instead I went back to the main menu and chose continue. So I didn't know why I decided to choose continue. I thought maybe it would just I thought that would start me at the end, or like the last level in the Eternal Castle, or maybe it would give me an option to do kind of a new game plus with all my items, which it does do that.
It does do that.
That's another story unto itself, though. But for me, when I hit continue on the PlayStation 4, it took me back to the save right before the final boss. So I was able to do the final boss fight again, and I earned a trophy for speed running the game, for completing a second run, and for getting a second ending, I think, or for completing it with no damage or something like that.
Yeah.
So I then asked you, I said, this doesn't make sense. You
And
know,
it didn't.
it, I figured, all right, I got a trophy for the second run. Shouldn't I have to play the entire game again to do that? So I gave you a video that showed you the exact way that I did it, and you weren't able to do that on PC. It actually started you from the very beginning of the game again after the ending.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, like I got those achievements straight up, and it was a kind of hell, to do it that way. But like this is exactly why, like I'll talk about my experience, but like this is where the magic of this game is happening, and I don't want to, like, I'm not saying it's going over anybody's head, but like if you think about what we're talking about right now, all of this kind of shit was exactly the way it was back then, where you might have had an arcade version of something and then maybe like a home console version of something, and there'd be these rumors about things you could do and things that, somebody had done, and already I love this thing that somebody should be salty about. Like, I should be salty that you got those achievements for free and I had to work for them. But when that happened and it didn't work on PC, and I could figure out why it didn't work on PC, and like it lends itself to something that's really magic about this game, which is it gives you this freedom to go, can I do that? Will that work? Like, can I really, like, if I do this thing and I push this way, can I get around this thing? And you can. And this is not something that most people expect from modern games anymore. They expect, like, everything to be fucking perfectly polished and to be, to work exactly how they think it will work. And there's not this tendency to want to, like, break a game in the common, play space. Like, most people don't play that way anymore, but a while ago, a lot of people did play that way.
I feel like one of those few games in a long time where when you ask, was that supposed to happen? It's not in a bad way.
Never. Well, because I'll give you countless examples. Like, because I had to do so many playthroughs and runs in this game to get the get the platinum and get all the achievements. Like, I had to check every single nook and cranny and everything that seemed like it could cut time or save me fights. Like, I had to see if it would work. And you're coming off the jump in the ancient temple, and you land on the ground, and if you're smart and remember the sequence, okay, I'm gonna land, you can pull off a roll into a jump and clear the gap where there's a man running away from you. If you kill that guy, like, if you're fast enough and you get to him and you kill him before he runs away, he has a fucking katana, and it's one of the strongest melee weapons in the base game before you get the mega sword. It's great, but it's like the type of thing where you see that you've done 10, 15, 20 runs where you see the dude run away and run up the ladder, and you go, hey, where did he go? And, like, you never think, or maybe you don't remember the sequence or whatever it is, but then once you have a reason to push a particular boundary, which the game is giving you, I needed to be faster to get the speedrun achievement. So I was already moving really quickly through it, and I just caught the guy and killed him, and I was like, holy shit, he has the katana from Sacrifice. And, like, that made my life so much easier because I knew that particular weapon really, really well, and it, it's already, like I said, it's one of the best ones other than the Megasword. So if there is a point to this game conceptually, it's like there was a passion to recreate this particular era in time in a way that you construct largely in your mind while it's like a kind of Inception. Like, it just puts you there so thoroughly, and it's such a love letter, and it's such a homage that it's like inescapable. Even if you weren't there, you feel it.
Staying with the depth of the game, when we talked about doing a second and third run, there are different requirements, but there are multiple endings to this game as well. That's kind of what pushed me to keep on breaking the game over and over again.
And multiple endings is such an early gimmick. It's an early gimmick to get people to replay a game because it was easy to do. And these are not easy to do.
this is where I'm going to turn it over to you, because while I was spending most of my time just trying to either break the game or find out if I had broken the game, you were doing the extra DLC, which is the story of the Lost Tales.
Yeah,
called
Sacrifice. Well, I mean, I'm gonna here. Let me, because we're pretty much at the end here. I'm gonna catch this cloud and pin it down.
Right.
Yeah, there are three modes of the game. There's the standard mode. There's duel, which you can play against an AI or against a second player, and you can play the standard games with 2 players as well. But Sacrifice is it only unlocks when you've completed your first run, your first end-to-end run of the standard game, and from there you can play it whenever you want. And what makes it super interesting to me is that it's almost like a remix of the concepts in the base game, that seems to be just as functional, and kind of, it's like they built a second car out of the same parts for a car they already built, and it's still worked, but it was like a completely different fucking design and everything. Because the basic way Sacrifice works is it counts how many times you die as wasted heroes, and the game changes procedurally with every wasted hero. And you have to get to the end of one big map, right? There's no more selecting particular levels. It's just one sort of circular, interconnected series of, stages that you run through. And ideally, you run through without ever dying, but it's very fucking hard to do. I've never done that. It took me 30 or 40 wasted heroes to beat Sacrifice. But it does provide you with a really interesting, another ending, and I assume there's a different one if you beat it in one life. Just to round this off with what we're describing about how there's something experiential offered by these games that has to go beyond the game itself, right? So Sacrifice provides a visceral sense, similar to Hotline Miami, of I have to move through this space. I have to kill everyone in my way. There's no room for error. And if I don't do this, there's not much consequence that, the game gives you, but you're so immersed, you put it on yourself, anyway. And so, that is such an important thing for me to just point out of, there's a whole separate game mode, and what is it for? It's to continue this experience of being immersed in both the game, its mechanics, the situation it presents, but also just the kind of the way it reaches through the screen.
I think that we wanted to make this video though more to just put people onto this game and show them that it's out there, because this is something special that has just been slept on for a couple years. And it's available on multiple platforms. It's available on Switch, PC, and PS4.
Yeah.
And the reason why I reiterate that this is a trial and error effort is the end of the credits of your first run. The one thing it tells you is never stop and keep on going. Yeah. And that's what you do with this game. You can't let this game beat you. This is a game I really think that people you need to play it to be able to understand anything else going on under the surface of it.
So there you have it, gang. I don't think the Eternal Castle can get broken down any better than what Max and I just attempted. At least at this juncture. As we both said, there's a much larger discussion to take place about EC. It's just waiting for a larger player base. Taking the Field of Dreams approach, Menchiari and company built it. Now you need to come and play. This obscurity, though, is also part of the beauty of the Eternal Castle. It's a game that clearly was made with love and for the sake of making something cool. There was no glory seeking with a game like this, just unbridled passion and creativity. Something not celebrated enough today in gaming or media in general. In a weird way, Eternal Castle feels like the first true video game I've played in a long time. This is a straight up old school, turn it on, hit the gas, and don't stop until the screen fades to black affair. And I loved every pixel action showcase moment of it. I think this is a perfect time for us to have our own fade to black. So let's depart the Eternal Castle, hop in our glider, and head back to our paper starship for some well-deserved R&R. Well, I don't quite know how we did it, but we made it through the Eternal Castle, and somehow we're still in one piece. Are we awake? Yes, we are, but we're very confused. I really have to thank you guys for coming along on this expedition to shed some light on the most unknown piece of media we've covered around here to date. Eternal Castle is a rare gem that I felt special to have stumbled on and have it still be a Pandora's box of sorts. It's been the most difficult game to pin down as far as analysis goes, but one of the most fun pieces of media I've had the chance to investigate like a true detective. I truly hope this video sparks some of you to go play this modern retro masterpiece. I'd like to thank the creator Leonard Menchiari, who I was able to have an online discussion with near the end of the project. Thank you for this game, for sharing your creativity, and for being an overall awesome person. Namaste. I can't thank you all enough though either for watching, and want you to know your time, support, and feedback are always appreciated here aboard the Paper Starship. If you like the work we do here and would like to help this starship reach new heights, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. There's also a Ko-Fi if you'd like to leave a tip, and we just opened a new Discord server as well. Both are linked in the description. But I hope this video was informative, most importantly, entertaining. The secrets of the Eternal Castle may still be buried, and maybe it won't be myself or Max, but they will be unearthed someday. Stay steezy, gang, and I'll see you on the next. But I hope you enjoyed the document of the Eternal Castle.